It's the newly rebranded Megaphone Racing, and it's my pleasure to welcome back Dirk Jordan. It's going to be a wrap-up of our MotoGP season. Welcome back, Dirk, and what an exciting end to an exciting season.
Hello, India. Absolutely, man. I don't know what I'm going to do the next 3 months. What are we going to watch? I mean, it's going to be so dull after the season that we've just witnessed. One of the most exciting ever. Remember when we started out and we did a preview to the season, and we spoke about all the riders, and they were all asked who's going to win this season, and every single one, 21 of them said Pecco Bagnaia, but it didn't turn out to be that way. Jorge Martin just stepped up to it and had a brilliant season himself. But they fought tooth and nail right up to the last weekend in Barcelona.
Before we dig into the season and to the last race, guys, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Let us know in the comments whether you liked it or not, what you didn't like, what you did like, what we should focus on a bit more. We'd like to get some of your feedback. And like I said, please remember to hit that subscribe button. It helps us a lot. Yeah, Dirk, it was an interesting one. It's the third year in a row that the championship was decided in the last race, and they went into the last race with Pecco 24 points behind, and he had to
Yeah,
do he did what he could do, or had to do. It
absolutely.
wasn't
Yeah.
enough. Tell us about that weekend a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was his weekend, but the glory wasn't his. As you said, he went into that weekend with a deficit of 24 points, won the sprint race, broke that down, brought it down to 14, but eventually he was just 10 points short after the main race. But he did absolutely everything that he could over this weekend specifically. He got pole position. He went in hard and fast right from the word go. He dominated all the practice sessions once again, like the previous weekend. He got pole position. He won both races. There was just no denying him, especially in the sprint race. Jorge Martin still came up to him from behind, but he just left him behind, and that was it. Martin, on the other hand, they he his best mate Alicia Spargaro during qualifying tried to tow him to give him a better high run, a flying lap. But that didn't work. It boomeranged on them, because he tried to give him a tow, and he was waiting for him. He looked back and he said, "Come, come." You could actually see him gesturing. But he could find the open road and the line, but Martin behind him couldn't. There were too many other riders, so he got stuck. So he had to start in fifth position. But like we've seen him do the season, especially the last half of the season, he launches really well, and he did so once again. He came from fifth in both races, challenged for the lead very briefly, and then decided to fall back, used his head, settled for third in both, and that was it. That was the weekend, and that was also, in actual fact, the season. It wasn't the most exciting final race, but I think we also have to remember that we were spoiled. We were just absolutely spoiled, especially the last two or three meetings where they fought tooth and nail for the final points. So it was a more quiet race, the main race. Jorge Martin stayed in third. There were large gaps between the riders, but it sealed the championship.
Yeah, the interesting thing was, and this is a sign of the maturity that Martin, showed this year compared to last year and the season before. He knew in the main race he only had to finish ninth or
Yeah,
higher,
that was it.
and he was happy to
That
settle
was
for
it.
that. In the old days, he
It would have
wouldn't
been
have been
stupid to
happy.
do
Yeah,
anything else. It would have been
exactly.
stupid to do anything else. So in the sprint, it looked like he wanted to, because he could have sealed it there. He only needed 14 points, so he could have sealed it there. And it looked as if he was up to the challenge. He almost fell for the bait, and then he also backed down when it got too heated. Quite soon in the race, he just fell back, and he was satisfied to stay in second and eventually to get past and stay and just take the final podium place. That was enough. He did enough this season.
Yeah, no, you're right. But interesting enough, he only won three races, and Pecco won
Oh,
11.
yeah,
But
that's a
Pecco
huge.
didn't stay on his bike, and Martin stayed on
Yeah,
his bike.
yeah,
I mentioned his maturity. Talk to us about Bagnaia's season a little bit. Like you said, everybody and his dog expected him to win this
yeah,
title, but it didn't
yeah.
turn out this way. Where did it go wrong for Pecco this season?
Well, he went into the season the favorite because he had a very good 2023 season. It also went down to the last race, but it wasn't as competitive as this. The margins weren't this fine, especially right at the end, you know. Martin still fell in that sprint, that sort of thing, the last one. So he had a seriously good 2023. Plus, he had absolutely the best bike on the grid. There's no denying that. And being champion, defending his title, I mean, he was in a position of power, full of confidence, etc. So everybody thought this was going to be his. And as you said, eventually he took 11 victories. You know, that's half the Sunday races. That doesn't happen very often, you know. Only 5 other guys have ever done that. So it's really, really a big thing. 11 plus 7 sprint races. Now, the other thing that we have to remember is last year and when we had a full season of sprints, he didn't do as well on the Saturday. He doesn't qualify as good usually as Martin, and Martin was up until now the sprint king, you know. Last year he took most of the sprints. But this year they both took 7. So it was an improvement for Pecco on the Saturday. And then going into the Sunday, he fought really, really hard. So those are 18 victories, you know, that's a huge, huge margin, and being on the podium. However, the downside of that is that 8 times he didn't finish, and those were very, very crucial races. He fell 7 times, one he was injured, and he couldn't take part. Now he says, well, after his loss of the championship, there was a little bit of a bitterness there that shone through. He says it wasn't all his fault. We have to remember he sort of looked over in the direction of Alex Marquez, you know, and reminded us at Aragon, Alex Marquez took him out when he passed him on the outside. Marquez didn't see him, went too wide, and he took him out in the corner. They both ended in the gravel. Now, at that stage, Pecco had passed Jorge Martin. He was crushing the rest of the field. He was in such good shape, but he didn't finish. So that was a crucial one. So there he lost 25 or 20 points at least. That's all true. But you can't look at it that way. You know, it's racing. You have to finish to get the points. And the difference being that Jorge Martin didn't finish in 3 races. He fell in 3 races, right? But in every other single race, he scored points. Even if it was just one, but he scored points. And when and if Pecco Bagnaia dominated and won, he was just a step or 2 behind. He took 2nd place, he took 3rd place. That's where he hung about, you know. So if we look at the podiums, for example, he had 32, Jorge Martin, 16 on Sundays and 16 on Saturdays, while in total Pecco Bagnaia had 26. That's 6. That's a big difference. So if you convert that into points, that's a lot of points that he missed out on, which is unfortunate. And Bagnaia himself said, even before we approached the final round, the finale, he said, this is going to be the championship of mistakes on his part. And it was so indeed. And unfortunately, he didn't make it.
What I liked about him is after the race, he showed what a true sportsman is like, his behavior, his composure. The Aprilia boss actually came over to him and complimented him. Tell us a bit about that, because you don't often see that. There's a bit of bitterness typically, but he was very gracious in defeat.
It was absolutely. I mean, he's a true champion, you know, and he showed that all along. He's done that before, but I mean, this year he was under real pressure and eventually he lost out. And to remain a gentleman under those circumstances at that age, if I may say so, is really tough, you know. But you could see, the interesting thing for me was that you could see as the season progressed how much the respect that Martin and Bagnaia had for each other. It's almost as if it grew, you know. There was more contact afterwards. There were more chats, that sort of thing. They were extremely respectful and positive about each other and each other's chances. And the incidents that you referred to is, I mean, he sent a message immediately after losing to Jorge, congratulating him and telling him, you're a worthy champion. And it was an honor to race with you. It was fun. You made me a better rider, you know, which is great. And then Massimo Ravoli from Aprilia, he came up to in the paddock up to Pecco Bagnaia, because Bagnaia on Sunday after the awards presentation Jorge Martin stayed behind and they announced him as the winner of the championship, so there's extra fireworks, extra champagne and everything. And Pecco Bagnaia stayed on the side of the stage. He didn't go. He didn't leave like the other guys. He stayed behind. He stayed in the wings and he kept his composure and he waited until that whole celebration was finished to support Martin. I mean, that's you don't find that every day. So Rivoli said, there are a lot of people that can learn a lot from you, and I think it is indeed true.
Interesting thing that we talked about Martin's maturity. That doesn't happen by itself. He had to work hard on it, and also the fact that
Yeah,
he was now twice overlooked by Ducati for a ride in the main factory team. And halfway through this season, he heard that he's not going to get that seat and it's going to go to Marc Marquez. And
yeah.
despite that, he was able to control his emotions and manage that kind of over eagerness that he had last year and win the championship. What did he do to get this done?
He was a completely different person earlier. He's always been competitive, but he himself says that he was obsessed with winning. Now, he had a bit of a tough road to get there. Apparently, he struggled to get into the rookies, the KTM Rookies Cup as well. At first, they didn't want to take him. He sort of got in on a buy, that sort of thing. And then, as you said, he came through in Moto3. He won. He won the championship. Same Moto2. But he was snubbed twice by Ducati, by the factory team, and he felt burnt by that. Really, that hurt him a lot. But last year he was uncontrollable in the sense that he would lose control during a race just to try to win it, and that he fell too many times. There were clashes, that sort of thing, and eventually he lost it. And he himself says that he has matured, quote unquote. He says, when you're 20, you know how to ride a bike, but you're still a rookie at life. That's the whole thing. And he learned not to be that. He says winning is great, but it's not the all important thing. It shouldn't be. You should be with your own people. You should give back. You should give back to racing. You should be kind, that sort of thing. And you could see him changing in front of our very eyes over the last 12 months, which is a brilliant thing to be part of. So he has changed. They have a sports psychologist working with him. They have had him for a year or whatever now. So there's a whole team behind him. His family's very involved. His dad's always there. His mom, everybody was at the last race, so on. So he's got a lot of support as well. And he's a completely different character. And he says, if you fix the rest, then the victories will be a consequence. He said, literally said that it will be a consequence of your person and of your actions. Just as a side note, I think his girlfriend has a lot to do with it as well, because since we've seen her in the paddock, there's a calmness as well. And you know how it goes. Guys in their 20s, I mean, they have only a couple of things on their mind, and racing and partying is one of them. But once there's a better half there. It keeps them stable, it keeps them grounded, and it has a really good effect on them. We saw that with Casey Stoner. I mean, he got married very, very young, but he had such a stable environment around him. Nothing else except what happens on the bike or within that inner circle entered his life, and it made him a champion.
Interesting thing here, you mentioned now that Ducati snubbed Martin twice. He's now moving to Aprilia and he's taking the number one plate or number one sign with him. Has that ever happened before in MotoGP?
It has happened in the top class, but not in MotoGP. Remember, MotoGP is the four-stroke era. So not being from a factory team and winning the championship, being from a satellite or independent riders team, as they call it. This is the first time. It happened 5 times in the two-stroke era, amongst others with Valentino Rossi in the last season with the two strokes. But this is the first in the four strokes. So it is a big thing that me personally, I don't set a lot of store by that. I think the whole independent rider thing is outdated. It came from a previous era where there was a big gap between money-wise and development-wise between the factory teams and the so-called independent, or I call them the B teams. These days, I mean, Pramac Ducati they initially at the start of the season they get exactly the same bikes as the Lenovo Ducati factory team. So there isn't all much of that of a gap. They have lots of money because they have huge sponsors these days. I think there's a bigger the the other level is more important now between the A, B, C, and D bikers group, where the Japs are in the D group, the concession system. It doesn't have anything to do with money anymore. Honda is filthy rich, but they're in D. We have to look at that rather than the independent riders thing. But he'll be in the history books. He got it. And as you say, yes, he's taking the #1 plate over to Aprilia. And that's weird. That feels a bit odd. Having a champ, there he goes. He doesn't stay with that same manufacturer anymore. There goes the plate as well. We still have to see if he's going to ride with that. I think he will. He wanted that way too much. And there's a possibility that he's not going to see that for a long time again. So I think he will ride with it next year. But that's going to be odd. An interesting thing happened as well. Davide, the team boss of the Lenovo Ducati team, said, well, Aprilia should pay for that #1 plate. So Aprilia, their team boss, came back and he said, well, we paid less than you did. And then, I mean, they paid a lot to keep Pecco right up there. They couldn't take it home. So yeah, there's a
Yeah.
bit of needling going around. But yes, he's going with the #1 plate over to Aprilia. It's going to be strange and an interesting thing.
The other rider this year that literally, made sure that everybody noticed him, and he's now part of the Lenovo Ducati team for next year, next to Pecco Bagnaia, and we'll talk about that just now, was Marc Marquez. I think he had a much better season than he ever in his wildest dreams could have imagined. He had 3 victories. He did well across the entire season with a
Yeah.
year-old bike. Shows
Yeah.
what he's
Well,
capable of.
he had much better season than I anticipated, going over from Honda. 3 victories, 3 times he was on the second step of the podium as well. He came third. He beat Anaya Bastianini, basically beat him into submission on arguably the best bike on the grid. I mean, Anaya got the same bike as Pecco Bagnaia. And on a year older bike, Ducati, he did that. So he had a really, really good season. He's smiling broadly, and it can only improve from there, going over to the factory team. Yes.
The interesting thing now is that like I said, him and Pecco is going to be teammates. And immediately after the race, Marc Marquez went over to the Ducati pits and
Yeah.
sort of introduced himself and everything else.
Mm.
I foresee a bit of a war, civil war, maybe. What is their
Yeah.
relationship like? Do they like each other?
I
Do they get along?
they
What can we
they
expect?
have a lot of once again they have a lot of respect for each other, but I mean not a single one of them is going to back down ever or take there won't be any team orders. They will Ducati will just want the victory. They would love a 1-2 in the championship next year. And by the way, that's not impossible. So they're just going to let them go and they give them anything that they could and just get them to race. So that's going to be the head-to-head for next year. Pecco Bagnaia will be rearing to go. He will be really want to win the crown back. He will want to reprove himself. He will have to recalibrate, though. He was very gracious in defeat. He did a lot. He put a lot of it in. But right after that race at Barcelona, you could see there's something in his eyes. It looks like someone has taken 1 or 2 mood stabilizing pills too many, before going into a stressful situation. He's sitting back. He's just being nice, but he's busy recalibrating his mind. He will have to go through certain things, certain processes, but no doubt he will, mentally, and then come back. And they're going to give him everything to try and win the championship again. They're going to give the same to Marc Marquez. Marquez on Tuesday, right after the race, we had the Barcelona tests, and Marc Marquez went out almost exclusively on the GP25, which he loved. Put up really great lap times. Got the 4th best lap time of the whole day on that GP25. It is 5/100ths of a second behind Pecco Bagnaia, who put up the 3rd best time. Interestingly enough, Alex Marquez put up the best time. So they are going to be right up there. Alex on the GP24, of course, this year's best bike. So it's definitely going to be a great season, and everybody's looking forward, and we can't wait to see what they are going to do.
Okay, Dirk, let's have a chat about the tests after the season ended. Everybody was swapping garages and riders going to different pits and everything else. Quite a strange phenomenon. Marc Marquez, for example. What was the general feeling like? How did Martin do in the Aprilias? What did the Ducatis look like for next year?
Yeah.
What was your impression?
Well, obviously, with I mean, it's post-season. Everybody's on a high. There's a sense of relief, sort of. So there's a nice spirit in the pits. Everybody love what they're doing. Nobody's going to complain, and we saw that with this time as well. Marc Marquez, he went, as you said, almost exclusively on the GP25. And he loved it. Put up, as we said, the fourth best time. Just above him was Pecco Bagnaia. Now, the interesting thing for me was the difference between the two of them, where Mark went from GP25 to GP23 to GP25 to get the most possible data. Pecco went for a staggered test run. So he had this year's bike, all the aero was the same, but he had this year's bike with changes to the chassis, the new chassis, and then to change new engine, that sort of thing, building up to the GP25. We're not sure on which one he put up his best time, but that gives you a better idea of the changes that you're making, obviously. So if you just do these changes and it goes better, you now know, okay, this chassis makes a difference. If you just jump on a new bike, completely new bike, you don't know which part really is making the difference. So that's the difference. But they're obviously sharing the data. So they had good runs, and they both look really good. When it comes to Jorge Martin, I mean, he's on a high. You can't get that smile off his face. He just loves what he's doing right now. And he went out there his first time on that Aprilia. I watched it. The second flying lap he went around that Barcelona circuit. I mean, in corner 5, he put down his shoulder on the tarmac, like he does. So basically, if you're not confident in the bike and in the grip, then you won't be able to do that sort of thing. The bike did look a bit loose under him, much more than he's used to. The braking is also different. You could see that. He braked too hard, putting the same pressure as usually, and the rear lifted. Stuff that he'll have to get used to and stuff that they will have to change for him. Now, there's already talk among some of the commentators saying, how is Aprilia going to defend that number 1 plate? And I think that's you can't say that. It won't happen. They won't be able to challenge for the lead, not with that Ducati stable as strong as it is. That's wishful thinking. So, but what we could see is that Jorge Martin lifts and elevates the whole garage. That the fact that he's there, the fact that the number 1 plate's there, the fact that he gives them feedback and he brings a new vision and a new eye, everybody's watching them. That could elevate everything that they do and bring the other riders and the bikes up as well. And we hope that happens, because I don't want to see Jorge Martin, the champion, halfway down the season experiencing what Alicia Spargaro and those guys experienced this year, where they don't finish because of technical problems, or they have such terrible tire degradation. Alicia Spargaro, he'll qualify in 4th place, end up 10 places lower. He'll just drop right through the back, launch poorly, and then just keep on falling back. And if that happens to Jorge Martin, he's going to become a very despondent young chap. So I don't want to see the world champ having to experience that. So we hope that the fact that he's there is going to bring that whole team up so that they are more competitive and that they also can give the Ducatis a run for their money with KTM next year.
I just want to briefly talk about KTM. They're bringing some serious guns into the second team now. Of course, that's moving up to the factory team, and they're bringing Maverick Vinales and Enea Bastianini in. You thought there's a bit of intelligence behind that? Tell me what your thinking is.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, they're all going to have the same spec bike, factory bike next year. It's basically a quartet of riders and very experienced riders. We've seen Enea Bastianini be as competitive as never before this season, being actually very aggressive. And Maverick Vinales has got so much experience. And the clever thing that they did is, if you take if you look at it carefully, is they did not take any riders from a Japanese manufacturer. They took it from the two other European manufacturers, from the Italians, from Ducati and from Aprilia. And they've done that before, KTM. They've taken technical guys and engineers from Ducati. So what that gives them is it gives them inside info into the best teams in the world, and how they do things and how their bikes are set up, etc., etc. So that could elevate KTM's game even before they start making any technical changes, which they love doing in any case. We saw them running at this Barcelona test with Pedro Acosta running really small aero, tiny front fairings, that sort of thing. So they are looking into everything already.
Lastly, Primo Pramac moving across to Yamaha. How did that go?
Well, everybody's happy at this stage. It's like in Christmas over there. Nobody will acknowledge if anything was a mistake. Everybody likes the new riders. The new riders like the new teams. Pramac, we have to admit, Pramac is a very, very strong team. It isn't by coincidence that they became the strongest independent riders team, the strongest non-factory team out there. And they fielded Jorge Martin. So they know what they're doing. They've got a very good team. They've got a good team boss. They've got a very knowledgeable and a strong world owner as well. So at the very least, they're going to put pressure on Yamaha and on the riders to up their game as well and to be more competitive. And if Yamaha then comes to the party, which it seems like they are planning to do, it could be a big, big improvement. If things had stayed the same with them just having a satellite team, that versus being a Pramac satellite team, there is a difference. It's like saying, Aki, are you racing, in Moto2 and Moto3? There's a difference between him and all the other teams. So if you get him on board, that's what KTM did, for example, in those racing formats. If you get him on board, there's an advantage. So I think there's an advantage in going for Pramac and not just for any other one.
All right. Next year, just briefly, you mentioned testing, and when does the testing start and when does the season start?
Mid-Feb in Sepang, and then about a month later, the season starts fully again. Yes.
Can't wait.
We can't wait. Yes.
Yeah. Guys, like I said, if you like this, let us know. Leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe. We'd like to hear from you, and we're going to try and do this again next year. Thanks, Dirk. I really loved getting to know MotoGP a bit. I must be honest, you opened my eyes a little bit from being a Formula One fanatic to a bit of a MotoGP guy. So thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great. I loved doing it. And I mean, we were fortunate. We were fortunate that we talked during this season. 2024 was historic. So it was a pleasure.
Thanks. Okay, guys, we'll see you next year. Thanks for watching.